for today's panel discussion. Mithun, I don't see him. Mithun has joined?
No, I think he has not joined.
Right. Then we have Dr. Shivani Bhatt from Jamnagar, Dr. Mansi from Ahmedabad, Rohit Ribello from Udaipur, Dr. Nirali from Mehsana, and Dr. Asif Sheikh is our new colleague at HOC Ahmedabad. So with the five of the panelists, we will go ahead with the panel discussion. I am seeing some background noise. If the others can mute, please. Yeah. So rather than going straight to the second line therapy, I am going to give a context of what do we mean exactly by when we call it a second line therapy and what the patient have been exposed to in the first line therapy. So when I look at the preferred first line endocrine therapy, Sahu has made it very clear that his choice will be CDK4/6 inhibitor with aromatase inhibitor. It can be CDK4/6 inhibitor with fulvestrant as well. And in some of the patients, it will be fulvestrant with aromatase inhibitor as the first line therapy. When we see that when the patient is metastasis, what kind of patients are there? So this is the anticipated answer I just said. There is some Kahani twist. So out of your 100 patients, and the question is going to Dr. Shivani, out of your 100 patients with breast cancer, how many of the patients are having early breast cancer as compared to advanced? And when I say advanced, it is metastatic. So how many of them are early? How many of them are metastatic? What is your estimate? I mean, just give an estimate.
If I say that in recently, because the early, if we feel advanced means metastatic only, I would say around 60%, 60 to 70% would be early, and metastatic would be around 30 to 40%.
Good enough. Good enough. The question is to Mansi. What proportion of your patients are pre versus postmenopausal?
So I think majority, more than 50% are postmenopausal. I would say about 70% are postmenopausal, 30% premenopausal.
Okay, good enough. And Dr. Nirali, what proportion of your patients are having hormone receptor positive and HER2 negative?
Sir, almost 50%.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just want to find out the estimate from our practice. So, Dr. Rohit, out of your postmenopausal early breast cancer, how many receive aromatase inhibitor and adjuvant therapy?
All, sir, almost all. Postmenopausal,
Wonderful.
almost all receive.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that's what I expected. And Dr. Asif, how many of these patients will have a recurrence? What proportion of the patient will have a recurrence out of the 100 patients that you are treating?
So 30 to 40%.
Wonderful. So if I look at my estimate in my practice, it's almost same as practically everyone else. 2/3 early, 1/3 advanced. Out of 65 early breast cancer, half of them are premenopausal, half of them are postmenopausal, hormone receptor positive. Almost 40 of this 65, and out of 43 postmenopausal. If I go ahead, out of the 30 postmenopausal early breast cancer, how many receive A as adjuvant? Almost all, 29 patients. And how many of them will have a recurrence? Half of them will have a recurrence. How many have endocrine resistance? And here we try to define what do we mean by endocrine resistance, which is a simple definition. And the next definition which I will come to is a difficult definition. Sahu also alluded to that. Shivani, how many patients will have endocrine resistance after having a recurrence?
Maybe around 10-20%.
So I'm not talking about primary or secondary resistance. A metastatic patient, how many of them will have endocrine resistance eventually? Practically everyone?
Eventually, almost practically everyone.
Yeah,
at later,
practically everyone at some point in time.
Yes, at some point of time they are going to have.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to find out. And Mansi, what is your definition of primary versus secondary? This should be an easy answer. So this will place the context of our further discussion.
So primary resistance patients who develop disease recurrence while on an AI, and I think it's a 2-year cutoff. Secondary is after 2 years, between 2 to 5 years if they have a recurrence while on an endocrine therapy.
Yeah. So Nirali, if you look at the second line in the second paragraph, secondary endocrine resistance is defined as relapse while on adjuvant therapy, but after first 2 years, or relapse within 12 months of completing adjuvant endocrine therapy. So I understand that this resistance is about the drug which is being given. For example, if the patient is given tamoxifen, patient is resistant to tamoxifen, but patient can still be given aromatase inhibitor. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. This is secondary. So,
Secondary.
yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
So tell me, when you are treating the patient with an adjuvant therapy, how many of your patients do have a recurrence within first 2 years, and how many of the patients do have the recurrence beyond first 2 years?
Sir, recurrence, I mean, secondary endocrine resistant or just recurrence?
Metastasis. I mean, if a patient is operated, given chemotherapy, and now is on adjuvant hormonal therapy, whatever hormonal therapy, it may be AI, it may be tamoxifen. I'm just trying to find out your estimate. What proportion of your patient have early recurrence, that is in first 2 years, versus what proportion have delayed recurrence, that is beyond first 2 years.
Yes, so mostly the patients who are actually to begin with also they are high risk disease, that is high nodal disease and greater T size. They usually tend to have a early recurrence. So if I consider in my situation, mostly 40% would have an early recurrence and 60% would have a late recurrence after 2 years.
Right. So Rohit, what is your estimate? 100 patients you have treated on adjuvant hormonal therapy. How many will recur early versus how many will recur late?
I think early recurrences in hormone positive is generally a little uncommon. Most of the patients who are hormone positive and HER2 negative tend to recur more later. And it again depends on the stage. The rate of recurrence will increase based on the stage as well as based on the number of years that have passed through. I would say less than 20% or less than 15% would recur within 2 years, and most of the rest of them would recur beyond 2 years.
Right. So Asif, now I am posting a little difficult question to you, and that is to define with some clarity visceral crisis.
Sir, visceral crisis is basically immitant organ failure, just not near the presence of metastasis in organ. So, for example, if it is liver, if only metastasis is seen in CT scan, then it is only visceral disease. But it is if it is associated with deranged LFT, like increased bilirubin or high transaminitis, then it will be called visceral crisis.
So Shivani, can we have a cutoff beyond which it is and beyond below which it is not a visceral crisis? Is it possible to have a cutoff? No, I mean, it is not
liver-
possible to have a cutoff, right?
Yeah, it's not possible because for visceral disease, maybe grade 3, grade 4 liver dysfunction, we can say, but exact cutoff, I really do not know.
So these are some of the definitions which I have placed. ABC4 definition everyone knows. It has been updated. I will come to that updated definition in ABC5 in the next slide. But in confirmed study, which was the study of fulvestrant, but the main exclusion criteria because of the visceral high burden was as presence of extensive liver and oblique or lung involvement, and it is not defined how what is meant by extensive. And in TAMRAD study, which was tamoxifen and everolimus study, the exclusion criteria included symptomatic brain metastasis, lymphangitis carcinomatous involving more than 50% of lungs. And how to measure this more than 50% of lung is still not very clear. and evidence of metastasis involving more than 1/3 of liver on sonogram or computed tomography. This is also high visceral burden. So it is not mentioning about the deranged LFT. So in ICON 2013, a panel was formed to have the consensus on calling it visceral organ involvement associated with symptoms, significant visceral disease. So Mansi, this panel, where I was one of the member, we were very liberal to call it significant visceral disease, very visceral organ involvement associated with symptoms. 95% of the panelists said that this should be called significant visceral disease. So what is your opinion about that?
So, sir, in terms of, so when you say significant symptoms, it could be like just cough versus hypoxia with lung involvement. So, how much of cough one considers as significant symptoms would be very subjective. So I think it's a little bit difficult. However, it is one of the easiest ways to define the thing, but I think if we could be a little bit more objective in terms of the symptoms, it would be better. Like, for example, in terms of lung symptoms, if the patient is hypoxic or if the patient is not able to do activities of daily living or something, like, putting in performance status as well would make sense. So the liver, you've given an example where there are deranged either bilirubin or LFTs. It makes sense.
Yeah. So in ABC file, they have tried to define it a little further, that liver visceral crisis, rapidly increasing bilirubin to more than 1.5 of upper limit of normal in the absence of Gilbert syndrome or biliary tract obstruction, or for lung visceral crisis, rapidly increasing dyspnea at rest, not elevated by drainage of pleural effusion. And what is rapidly increasing dyspnea is something very subjective, right?
Correct.
Mansi? So,
Correct, sir.
they have gone further, that the more subjective and difficult to define situation is impending visceral crisis. What I am trying to reach at is that when we were using only hormones, quite a few patients were being accurate for being given hormonal therapy because of perceived impending visceral crisis, and with addition of the drug like fulvestrant and anastrozole or a hormonal therapy with CDK4 inhibitors, and we will have quite a few drugs in near future where we are more liberal in offering hormonal therapy to the patients with metastatic breast cancer. Is that correct, Nirali? Our threshold has come down in giving hormonal therapy to metastatic breast cancer patients.
Definitely, sir, because we have more options and things have been more clear with all these studies.
Right. And Nirali, what is your definition of rapidly efficacious therapy? How rapidly is the rapidly efficacious in your definition, in your viewpoint? It is second day, second week, second month. How rapid is rapid?
So rapid, if we see, again, it's a subjective thing. Clinically, if we see the patient and patient is having visceral involvement, rapid is within say days, because the patient's improving hypoxia, improving liver function also. But if we are not looking at the visceral crisis, then it could be weeks or months.
Right. So
I am not able to answer it exactly, sir.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, there are a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of unclarity, and that's what I want to bring out in our discussion. That where we want to focus in coming years. So, Rohit, if the patient is coughing in front of you, having some chest pain, his SpO2 is 94 at rest. How soon you will want the patient to have a response? How rapidly is rapid enough?
I think I would prefer something within 2 to 3 weeks. I think in palliation, it's very important to palliate what problem the patient is telling you. So in this sort of a situation, even if there is no technical so-called visceral crisis, I want the patient to feel better as fast as possible. So I would be expecting something in about 2 to 3 weeks. And I think my first
Right.
go would be like, if the patient is very symptomatic about something, to go with chemo first. Maybe after 3 months, I'll shift on to endocrine therapy.
Why after 3 months? Why not after 6 months?
I mean, there's no real goal of, basically my aim
Alright.
that
Yeah,
at that point
I
of
agree,
time
agree,
is
agree,
just
agree,
to
agree. Yeah,
take care of
sure.
the visceral crisis. Yeah.
Sure. So Asif, I also agree with Rohit that he wants the patient to respond within 2 to 3 weeks. So how many of your patients on chemotherapy respond within 2 to 3? And how many patients on aromatase inhibitor with CDK4/6 inhibitors respond in 3 weeks? Roughly, what is your impression?
Sir, after chemotherapy, around for symptomatic relief and decrease the burden to improve the patient, I think around 70 to 80% patients improve within 3 weeks of chemotherapy, and CDK4/6 inhibitor plus aromatase inhibitors are around 40 to 50% patients.
So good. Sahu is having a few comments in the chat box. So Sahu, what are your comments on the discussion up till now?
Sir, perfect, sir. But only simple thing for me, visceral crisis is like where you would not get a second chance. So this is something which is a functional compromise and a structural compromise. So you have one chance, and that is where the visceral crisis definition stands for me. It's a biochemical and a clinical and radiological. It's all put together. Point number two, I take your point, but I still feel that CDK4/6 are very powerful drugs. And I think the response, what others are telling, makes sense. I would not feel that 80% respond to chemotherapy. So for me, it is around the 40%.
Absolutely.
Even I see that.
Absolutely.
It's not 80%.
So-
that is too big a
so with
number
the-
to be.
Yeah. So with the availability of drugs like CDK4/6 inhibitors, our threshold of offering chemotherapy has gone up. We wait for some more time before giving chemotherapy. That's the point which I wanted to drive. Right. So what are the possible scenarios we have when we use the second-line therapy? So for a de novo metastatic breast cancer, first line is often an aromatase inhibitor with CDK4/6 inhibitors. There may be primary resistance, there may be secondary resistance, and then the patient on progression has the second line therapy. If the patient was having early breast cancer and develops metastasis on adjuvant hormone therapy, it may be adjuvant tamoxifen or adjuvant aromatase inhibitor. There may be primary resistance, there may be secondary resistance. With primary, patient may be given chemotherapy, patient may be given AI with CDK4/6 inhibitors. With secondary, patient may be given AI with CDK4/6 inhibitors. And if the adjuvant was AI, if there was primary resistance, these are the various options. The secondary resistance, these are the various options. And then the patient receives second line chemotherapy, second line hormonal therapy. I will discuss a couple of these scenarios and try to find out the opinion of the panelists of how they are offering the treatment to these patients. So the first is a hypothetical case report. A female of 48 years who was post-menopausal, having carcinoma right breast. Mastectomy was done, T2N0, hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative, 4 cycles of TC were given, followed by tamoxifen. Because 48 was a bit too early for her to be on aromatase inhibitor. That's what this is hypothetical case anyway. So at the end of 51 months on tamoxifen, patient came up with abdominal pain. The ultrasound shows liver metastasis, SGPT, SGOT around 150, alkaline 320, bilirubin 1.1, and no other metastasis on PET CT scan. Biopsy was done. Histopathology confirmed that it was metastatic breast cancer, which was again hormone receptor positive and HER2 negative. So Shivani, is this patient having a visceral crisis or not?
As such, her enzymes are around 150, and of course, in how rapidly it is increasing, that is also we can monitor. But if her albumin in PTINR is normal, then we can say liver function is normal, and so in that case, we might think that she's not in a visceral crisis.
Right. So for all the panelists, I am presenting something which is what we are seeing in day-to-day clinical practice, and where we have some difficulty in taking the decisions. So for some of the situation, we may not have hardcore data behind whatever decision that we might be taking, and this is what I want to bring out and discuss with allied panelists. So Mansi, this patient, while the biopsy report came, the bilirubin became 1.5 and SGPT rise from 150 to 230. Now, will you say that patient is in impending visceral crisis?
Yes, sir. Because I think the biopsy reports, we usually get them within 4 to 5 days, maximum like a week, right? So less than a week. If
Right.
the bilirubin is going up and the SGPT, SGOT are going up, this would definitely be impending visceral crisis. So I would actually, in this particular patient, probably offer chemotherapy.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Ali, if fortunately by the time biopsy report came, the clinically and biochemically patient was same, patient had not deteriorated. So, is she in either actual or impending visceral crisis?
She looks like she is in impending visceral crisis. You are saying the reports, if the patient is rapidly increasing bilirubin within 4 to 5 days?
I cancelled that. I
Okay.
cancelled that line. And the next line is by the time the report comes.
Then she's not. No, then.
Right.
Okay.
So,
then she is not in impending visceral crisis. No.
Right. So,
So then.
will you give chemotherapy or you will give one of the hormones?
No, sir. Then I would definitely prefer one of the hormones. Since she is a 48-year-old female, one thing is if
No,
she is
now
mostly
she is, now she is 53.
Okay, now she is 53. Okay.
Yeah.
Then preferred is obviously aromatase inhibitor with CDK4/6 one. But if there are some financial constraints, aromatase inhibitor with fulvestrant.
Right. So Rohit, you will agree with Nirali that you will not give chemotherapy, right?
Yes, sir. If it's no rapid increase in bilirubin and liver enzymes, I will stick to CDK4/6 with aromatase inhibitors.
So oncotype DX, Rohit, you will not order at this time because the patient is having metastatic disease, right?
Yes, sir.
Will you order something like foundation or liquid biopsy? That has become quite fancy nowadays.
Right now, that's not what I am doing, sir. I basically just put the patient because the guideline says that if a patient progresses on endocrine therapy, CDK4/6 plus AI is going to work. Later on, if they progress, then there's a different ball game. You look for PI3K and all that. But right now, I think CDK4/6 plus AI is going to give us the best answers.
So any molecular test, forget foundation or liquid biopsy, will you order any molecular test at this juncture?
You can do a PI3K mutation at this point of time, but that's not something I do routinely in practice.
Right. So Asif, Rohit is reluctantly agreeing on my repeated asking whether he will go for a molecular testing or not. And he said that he will do PI3 kinase. Let us see, I am a fan of doing some molecular testing. So which another molecular test will do at this time?
Sir, ESR1 mutation can be done to select aromatase inhibitors or fulvestrant with CDK4/6 inhibitors.
And anything else?
Sir, other tests, germline, BRCA mutation or PI3 kinase mutation. So these 3 tests can.
So this test can be done and kept in the file. That will not be useful at this time, but they will be useful for the decisions in future. Mansi, is that correct? If at all you do these tests like PI3 kinase, ESR and BRCA mutation, they may not be useful at this time. That may be useful in future.
Correct, sir. I usually don't do the ESR1 mutations because I'm not really sure. But yes, the other 2 definitely, yes.
Right. So, if you look at, everyone said that they will, I asked only a couple of people, but practically everyone will agree that they will be using CDK4/6 inhibitors with aromatase inhibitor. But if you look at the CDK4/6 inhibitor studies, patient population, in the first line, Mona Lisa 2, Paloma 2, Monarch 3, Mona Lisa 7, as well as Mona Lisa 3. And all of them want to give the treatment to relapse more than 12 months of completion of adjuvant endocrine therapy, while this patient was on adjuvant tamoxifen. So, starting from you, Mansi, will that change your decision?
I think this patient probably relapsed after 4.5 years,
Yeah.
so close to 5 years. I would still try the AI plus a CDK4/6 inhibitor. She's kind of borderline. Fulvestrant, most of the patients are not very happy taking fulvestrant long term. So I would still give the patient a chance and try AI with a CDK4/6.
So, Shivani, is that your opinion as well?
Yes, with AI with CDK4/6.
Nirali, quickly, yes or no? AI CDK4/6 or something else?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Rohit, yes or no?
Yes.
And Asif, yes or no? Quick.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So if you look at, I mean, this patient is here. She is in secondary resistance. Adjuvant tamoxifen, 4.5 years patient had metastasis. And I also have written AI CDK4/6 inhibitors. But let us quickly look at the data. In Mona Lisa 2 study, the patients were taken, if they were off the adjuvant hormonal therapy for more than 12 months. And where is that line which I'm looking at? Previous history, previous therapy was permitted, previous hormonal therapy was permitted. Time since last non-steroidal inhibitor must have been greater than 12 months. So they are not mentioning about tamoxifen. And I could not find in this article that what proportion of the patient were on tamoxifen when the patient were enrolled for this study. But practically, they want to exclude the patient who are on non-steroidal aromatase inhibitors. And if you look at previous endocrine therapy, if it was tamoxifen, then also the HR was 0.617. So they can be given AI with CDK4/6 inhibitors. In Monarch 3, it is not clearly mentioned. It is written that they must not have received systemic therapy for advanced disease. Endocrine in the neoadjuvant or adjuvant setting was permitted if the patient had disease-free interval of more than 12 months from the completion of endocrine therapy, and they have not specified what endocrine therapy the patient had received. I hope that they did not receive either tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitor. In Paloma 2 also, 47% of the patient had received tamoxifen, and for patient with the most recent therapy, if it was anti-estrogen, the hazard ratio is 0.56. So the drug works, even though this slide shows that patient should have completed adjuvant hormonal therapy more than 12 months. If you look at carefully the criteria, the patients are eligible, and in our clinical practice also we offer an aromatase inhibitor with a CDK4/6 inhibitors. So Shivani, if I can start with you, that what will be your choice of CDK4/6 inhibitors for this patient?
For this patient, because with that, of course, abemaciclib has showing OS benefit. We can add that with AI.
Yeah. Mansi, any choice of CDK4/6 inhibitors?
So sir, I would be little reluctant using ribociclib just because of the adverse effect profile with elevation LFTs being probably high in ribociclib as well as abemaciclib. I usually would put these patients on palbociclib.
Okay. Nirali, your choice?
Sir, postmenopausal, though patient has liver mets, otherwise preserved liver function, so I would prefer abemaciclib.
Rohit?
Any of the three, I think, are adequate, sir.
Right. And Asif?
So if LFT is normal, then any of the three.
Yeah. So LFT is not normal in this patient. So that is the caveat. So for abemaciclib, it's extrapolation. We don't have the clear data whether patient on tamoxifen were taken in the study or not, but it is an extrapolation. We have the survival advantage in Monarch 2 study.
Monarch 3, sir. That's how here.
Yeah,
For the Monarch 3, I just pulled up the data. 50% were patients who had not received any endocrine therapy, and
Right.
50% out of the other 50%, half had received AI, and half had received other AI, other hormone therapy. So that could be
but
it also.
that was more than 12 months, right?
Yeah, yeah. They did not
So
take anything in the adjuvant which had within 12.
exactly. So this patient was on adjuvant tamoxifen.
Yeah. So after 12 months,
So
and
yeah,
50% were those who never received anything.
right. So we can extrapolate from the other trial that abemaciclib also could work if other work. And we have the good data of abemaciclib in liver metastasis patients. They have done the subset analysis of these patients. For ribociclib, we do have survival advantage in ESMO before a couple of months. And so the question is to you, Mansi. The other two agents have shown, forget about this particular patient, just concentrate on the literature available. Aviva and Rebo have shown the survival advantage, while Palbo has not shown the survival advantage. So, do you believe that Palbo is not having survival advantage?
I don't believe that, sir. I mean, I feel palbociclib, and we've had enough patients on palbociclib to kind of see
Yeah.
that they do equally well. And I think it was more of the study design trial and everything where they used
Absolutely.
pre-treated patients. So I don't choose the CDK4/6 inhibitor based on survival data that much, to be very honest.
Right. So, my comment on that is, in first line as well as second line trial, all three drugs have the HR in PFS of about 0.55 and HR in survival of around 0.7 to 0.75. So irrespective of whether it was significant or not, and in all these studies, the primary endpoint was PFS and not overall survival. So one drug showing OS advantage, another drug not showing OS advantage, it doesn't mean that OS advantage is not there. So as a class, CDK4/6 inhibitors are to be used. Which is to be used is anyone's choice. So this patient was given abemaciclib with letrozole, and she progressed in liver as well as bone after 14 months, and still the patient was not in visceral crisis. Still the patient was eligible for hormonal therapy. So Shivani, at the end of 14 months, she is in again secondary hormonal resistance, right?
Yes.
So what will be your choice of treatment?
Yes, so if we need to do the PIK3CA mutation study, and if she is mutated PIK3CA, we have she should receive fulvestrant with alpelisib. And if it is wild type PIK3CA, then we can use fulvestrant mono as a single agent, or with everolimus. But of course, if liver function test, we need to
monitor. Yeah. So Nirali, this patient was already treated with with a CDK4/6 inhibitor. What is the data of alpelisib with fulvestrant in the patient with previous exposure to CDK4/6 inhibitors?
Sir, in PIK3 mutated patients, I am not very sure, but there is data of fulvestrant with alpelisib working in these patients, sir. I'm not very sure, honestly. Because the patient is PIK3 mutated.
Yeah. So Rohit, your comment?
No, sir. Definitely, even if a patient has a previous CDK4/6, there is data from the SOLAR-1 study itself. In PIK3CA mutated patients, there is some benefit, although the number of patients are very few. But I think that is a very valid option in patients who are PIK3CA mutated. In others, you really don't have an option. You just have, fulvestrant is a valid option there. But I think I would still go with, and there is some other prospective, retrospective study that says that it works. Although it doesn't work as well, but there is definitely a PFS advantage. OS, I'm not very, very confident.
Right. So Asif, this is the data of a patient with prior CDK4/6 inhibitors. The hazard ratio is 0.48. So how happy you are looking at this hazard ratio?
Sir, absolute benefit is with the alpelisib plus fulvestrant is 5.5 months versus 1.8 months. So if CDK4/6 inhibitors are given, then PFS is generally lower in that subgroup in comparison to without CDK4 inhibitor therapy. So if
So
patient has
the
not
problem
received
here,
CDK4,
yeah. So even though this looks a good separation of the curves, the problem here is that there are just 17 patients, 10 on placebo and 7 on alpelisib. So with 17 patient data, we should not look at the curves. Is that correct, Asif?
yes, sir.
This is not a good data. So Mansi, you have the data exclusively on patients who are exposed to CDK4/6 inhibitors.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat the question?
The data of alpelisib fulvestrant in the patients who have been exposed to CDK4/6 inhibitors.
So, I mean, so you put up the BILEAF study where patients have
Yeah.
received prior CDK4/6 inhibitors, where I think alpelisib has shown a benefit in the PFS.
So this study was having a primary endpoint, a proportion of each cohort alive without PD at 6 months. And if more than 30% of the if the lower bound of 95% was more than 30%, the primary endpoint was made. So this is not the conventional endpoint that we are looking at. And Sahu, any comment on that?
No, sir. I look at this data that definitely the median survival was around 6 to 7 months in each arm. So it's only a data for me that if I do not use fulvestrant frontline, I can use a AI in the second line. That's the only thing I take from this study.
Right. So PFS at 6
Sir,
months was
one more thing, sir.
50.4
One
months.
more thing.
Yeah.
Sir, can you ask if there is a PIK3 mutated and this patient somehow is a very badly controlled diabetic? How
Yeah.
would the what would be the approach? Because this is a more practical approach because alpelisib is a very bad drug. It is not an easy drug to give.
Agreed. So you want to ask or you want to answer the question?
No, please, the whole panel because we have you and Mansi and others quite. Because see, if I look at the data, so there's one data that if there's a PIK3 mutation, these patients do very bad, which was showed up in the data which is showed fulvestrant, the median PFS
Yeah.
only 1.6. So this is the difficult area which people need some answers.
Right. So I think we are already at 9 o'clock, and Mansi, maybe you can quickly answer this question. If the patient is a badly diabetic patient, you will start or not start, and if you start, how will you manage?
So, sir, to be very honest, I'm not a big fan of alpelisib. In that particular patient, I would just rather give chemotherapy and not start the alpelisib. However, if you want to start alpelisib, I think first getting like a physician or a diabetic expert to try and control the diabetes would be a better option, especially with liver mets and everything. I think sugar control is very difficult, and I have not managed such difficult patients in a very long time. So having like an expert managing the diabetes, and then once the diabetes is under control, I think we can add the alpelisib.
So I will try to control diabetes with drugs like metformin and other drugs, avoiding insulin to the extent possible. If that is not possible, I think I will switch to chemotherapy, as Mansi rightly said.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
Yes, sir, same things. Because I think chemo should be there in the armamentarium, and we should not be using it at the very last. That's the only thing.
Right. So, Shivani, if this patient was having BRCA mutated, will the treatment change now?
Yes. So if it's not PIK3CA but BRCA mutated, so in that case, of course, we
was
need
not
to
there.
give.
BRCA is mutated.
Yeah. So if in that case we because she has progressed on 2 endocrine therapies, now we can think about olaparib in her case.
And will it be ahead of chemotherapy or after chemotherapy?
Before chemotherapy.
Nirali, Shivani wants to give olaparib before chemotherapy. You agree with her or not?
Yes, sir. As per the data, what Abhishek sir has shown, I think definitely olaparib will work in BRCA mutated patients even before chemo.
Right, your comment before chemotherapy or after chemotherapy?
After chemo, sir.
After chemo, very good. And Asif, your comment?
Sir, after chemotherapy.
So, if we look at the PFS, it's significant. If we look at the subset analysis, it works in hormone receptor positive as well as negative patient, but for hormone receptor positive, the data is not so very encouraging. It is just kissing the line of unity. If you look at the survival, it is super impossible. The hazard ratio is 0.9 and 95% confidence interval is 0.66 to 1.23. And if we look at the overall survival of no prior chemotherapy versus prior chemotherapy, so this is what I wanted to show up. If it is given ahead of chemotherapy, survival is better. And Rohit, you said that you want to give it after chemotherapy. So do you want to change your decision looking at this curve, or?
Now, the inclusion criteria included 2 lines of chemo, no, sir?
So if we look at the inclusion criteria, it showed less than or 2 lines of previous chemotherapy for metastatic disease. And if hormone receptor positive, patient should not be suitable for endocrine therapy or progress on at least one endocrine therapy. These are the inclusion criteria for hormone receptor positive patients.
Okay. I was a little confused. I thought they had given chemotherapy to all patients and only then, yes. Okay.
Right. No. So this is what I wanted to bring out. So if the patient is having receptor positive metastatic breast cancer, failing on 2 lines, eligible for olaparib, I think ahead of giving chemotherapy, particularly platinum chemotherapy, I think we should try with PARP inhibitor first and then go for chemotherapy. That's what I wanted to bring out in this discussion. You agree with that, Rohit?
Yes, sir.
There is
This
good
data
hazard
makes it quite clear.
Yeah. Right. So suppose this patient, forget about everything. Patient was not given tamoxifen, but was given letrozole at 40 and she was menopausal. Will the treatment change? Now she is here, adjuvant AI, and patient is having secondary hormonal resistance. I think now the things are pretty clear, isn't it? Starting from Shivani.
Yes, so in that case, we have to give CDK inhibitors with fulvestrant, as she has already received aromatase inhibitors.
So Mansi, again the twist. If the patient was PIK3CA as well as GBRCA both mutated, and what will be your choice? Mansi is there, or?
She's
Sorry,
there.
I was muted. Sir, I would still
Okay.
try the CDK4/6 inhibitor first, along with the fulvestrant,
And
even
and-
if the
and,
patient is PIK3 mutated.
yeah, and why?
So, sir, I think we do have data suggesting that CDK4/6 inhibitors do work in the first-line setting despite having PIK3 mutations.
So survival data is there with CDK4/6 inhibitors. It is not yet there with PIK3
Correct.
inhibitors.
Correct.
Right? Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful. And Nirali, you agree with that, or you have some different idea?
No, sir, completely agree.
Right. And at this point, any choice for CDK4/6 inhibitor, or same like what we discussed previously, Rohit?
No, sir. I mean, there's no real. I mean, except that Palbo doesn't have OS data yet, but otherwise, I don't think there's a difference between any of these.
So I think this brings us to the end of the discussion. I think we exceeded by about 5 minutes, 7 minutes. So hormone therapy is the treatment of choice for patients who are not in visceral crisis. Visceral crisis needs to be defined clearly. Addition of the drugs like CDK4/6 inhibitors and PIK3 inhibitors can help in patients with poor prognostic features and help in delaying chemotherapy. And toxicities of these drugs need to be tackled. So any last comment from each of the panelists, starting from Asif, before the session?
Sir, for first line endocrine therapy for metastatic hormone positive breast cancer for postmenopausal lady, AI plus CDK4/6 inhibitor should be the choice. And then if she progress, fulvestrant based therapy should be the second line with or without.
Good. Nirali, last comment before we close.
Sir, actually, I have a question rather than a comment, which is slightly deviated from this topic. For a premenopausal woman whom we are starting CD4/6 inhibitor with aromatase inhibitors, for LHRH agonist, sir, is there any particular period we have to give LHRH agonist, or serum estradiol level should be okay?
So quick answer, 1 month. And at the end of 1 month, we should look at estradiol FSH. And if it is in the menopausal range, we can start with CDK4 inhibitors with aromatase inhibitor. So Rohit, any final comment on these messages?
Actually, not related to this, sir. I just want to add one doubt about the CAN-ASSIST test. Since it is not validated in India and does not have any governmental organization's approval, how
test?
safe are the CAN-ASSIST? Sir?
Can assist.
Can assist.
Yeah. So
Okay,
how safe are we legally? Avoiding chemotherapy.
So after we close the session, I will pass on the question to Abhishek. He will answer this question. Mansi, any comment on these take-home messages?
No, sir, I agree. And I think there was recently a retrospective analysis of using CDK4/6 inhibitors in visceral crisis by Dr. Shaina Dawood, which actually showed that they might be a little bit better. However, it was a retrospective small study. So it would, I know it's difficult. It's probably not going to happen in a study, but I think that gives us a little bit more confidence using them in these
So
patients.
Shaina is very passionate about CDK4/6 inhibitors, and she has shown that in her study as well. Good. Shivani, any final comment?
Nothing, just yes, with all this available drugs, of course, the role of chemotherapy is reducing day by day, and it's just been given in few indicated patients only.
But everybody
we can
will
say
get
that-
chemotherapy at some point.
Yeah, of
They'll
course.
still
Yeah,
get
so-
chemo.
Yeah.
We can say that role of chemotherapy is getting delayed, and we are able to delay the onset of chemotherapy. So with that, that brings to the end of this panel discussion. I thank the organizers to give me this opportunity. And I thank all the panelists for leading to a wonderful discussion on what I made a little difficult, but I mean, I made it deliberately difficult because I wanted to find out the answers for which I also don't know the clear answers. So once again, thank you very much. And before we close the meeting, Abhishek, you have to answer the question that Rohit had asked.
Sir, you should answer because you order the maximum number of CAN-ASSIST at Vedant. You are the one who uses it.
So if I have to answer, the answer is that this test has been by regulatory authorities in our country. So legally we are safe. I mean, it's not that we are unsafe, and we have to ensure that we are discussing the uncertainty of everything. Even if you had ordered Oncotype DX and the test came out low risk, and then also patient has a small chance of having a recurrence. So nothing is on or none. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. Ghanshyam, what is your opinion about that, and what is your comment on the overall discussion that we had?
So I think so. We discussed quite a salient features, and you made panel discussion really tough. So looks like after.
Yeah, I agree. But if I was on the panel, that would have been tough for me as well, because I wanted to find out the answers to the questions for which we don't have clear answers. And panelists have a job in giving a good answers to these questions. Yeah, so thank you. And the chairpersons, I think we can close the session.
So the chairpersons are already gone. So you
Very
and me are the chairpersons for because it's already 9:15. And I would like to thank Dr. Biswas.
Still there are few people on the
stayed
chair.
till the end. Sir, thank you, Dr. Biswas. You stayed till the end. So you were very patient. And Dr. Sahu also. some of our chairpersons are very impatient. So I think I need to thank all of the speakers as well as the panelists. You did a wonderful job, because Dr. Desai is generally very tough, and we had specially kept a female breast cancer panel, so you needed so it was even more tougher. But I think everybody did a great job. These are practical questions which need to be answered. Still, last Mansi mentioned Shaina Dawood. I am not Shaina Dawood or Chirag Desai, but I agree with what she says, because I have also pulled off a few patients who were in impending visceral crisis on abemaciclib. So I am very comfortable with that. I don't think it is any inferior to a chemotherapy. It's just a mental block. It's a mental block. You try it in a few patients, you will probably find out you are far better than chemotherapy. But in any case, we don't have the guidelines. As Hauser said, chemotherapy is ultimately what is written even in the ESMO guidelines in crisis. So there's no good answer to that. Thank you once again, everyone who joined. And I would like to say good night and thank you again. So we'll have another breast cancer meeting.